So, welcome everybody. Today, our first speaker is Dr. Mickey Taylor. He received his PhD in environmental toxicology from Clemson University in 1998. His experience includes 20 years as a greenhouse, nursery, landscape, and garden center owner, lead grower, and pesticide applicator for his 55,000 square feet greenhouse operation. After 1998, his research explored the efficacy of constructed wetlands for remediating nutrients and pesticides for commercial nursery operations. In 2006, he became the director of research for a small biotechnology startup company in the UGA Biobusiness Center, working to commercialize a biopesticide booster product. In 2011, he became a senior agriculture advisor in the USDA Foreign Agricultural Service Civilian Response Corps, where he spent one tour in Afghanistan, running a demonstration farm, working with background detention facilities, agriculture teachers, to re-educate Taliban detainees that were deemed low risk. 4 years ago, he became the coordinator for UGA's Pesticides Safety Educator Program and has been working with them to improve and modernize the program. Welcome, Dr. Taylor. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Shamat. Okay. Yes. My screen up here. Okay, we're going to cooperate. We're going to talk a little bit about the emergency and incident response. But I'm going to start first with safety and security when you're transporting or storing your pesticides, because that's the beginning of the process to make sure that you don't have an emergency or a spill incident that you have to respond to. So starting out with the safety and security during the transportation and storage of your pesticides, we'll get into that in just a moment. The upper picture there shows you a pickup truck with someone strapping in their pesticides before they go out to the job. That's a very representative way of safely transporting your pesticides. The guy is checking to make sure that the strap is very tight so that the pesticides don't have a possibility of sliding around. In the lower picture, you have a representative storage facility. It's not perfect, but it's well organized and would probably pass without a comment from the Department of Ag's inspectors. Some of the learning objectives I'd like you to take away from today or understanding the various precautions you need to take when you're getting ready to move your pesticides from your storage facility out to your job site. I also want you to know when you are required to make a transportation security plan. If that should happen and you don't do it, the fines can be very substantial. So you really need to know when you're required to do that. I want to go over the basics of a well-placed pesticide storage site so that you have it sited where you have a problem contaminating groundwater or water or surface waters. I also want you to be able to describe the conditions that you need to meet to safely store your pesticide. Also recognize the conditions that lead to possibility of an increased security risk and what you should do about that. Finally, I want you to be able to explain why storage site security is so necessary. Find out that it can save you a good deal of time and money. Let's get into transporting pesticides. The upper picture here, you can say is well organized. He's got his pesticide containers strapped in already. There's a spill kit that he's getting ready to load. He's got the smaller containers of pesticides in a lockable box there. So he's doing just about everything that he needs to do. The lower picture is another story that a lot of times we see pesticides going out to the site like that, where it's just a jumble. And that can be something that's very careless and can actually harm you, your employees, the environments, and even others in the community. You have to remember that some pesticides, the ones that have organic or petroleum solvents, can be highly flammable. They can even be explosive under some situations. When you have a spill of one of those pesticides, or even the powders or some of the other pesticides, it can result in human exposure, environmental pollution, financial loss to you, and potentially legal action if someone is hurt that's not part of your team, that isn't taken care of by you. You also need to remember that vehicles driving by on the highway, going by a spill there, can scatter the pesticides quite a big distance. The powders are very susceptible to the wind from the passage of the vehicles, especially tractor trailers. If one of the vehicles runs through a liquid pesticide, their tires can carry that a long distance before it finally dries off of the tires, and you have to clean all of that up. When you're taking care of the spill that you've had on a highway, so that can take a lot of time. As far as containing your cargo goes, truck beds are very convenient, but you have to be cautious. You never stack higher than the side of the vehicle in a severe turn, or avoiding traffic, or avoiding deer or something like that. You can end up throwing one of the boxes of pesticides or bags of pesticides over the side of the vehicle. And then it's a matter of cleaning that up if it should shatter and spread pesticide around, or you might lose it completely and then be sued because someone or something died from it. So you want to secure your containers like with this cargo strap. Secure any tanks you might have in the back of your vehicle. If there are nails or stones or sharp objects in the truck bed, you want to get things out, or secure the sharp instruments so that they don't puncture your pesticide containers. Steel beds and bed liners are the best thing you can use. Obviously, they're much better than wood because they're much easier to clean. Wood, the liquid pesticide will actually soak into a dry pesticide, gets down into the very fine micro cracks in the surface of wood, and it's extremely difficult to get those ever clean. You want to ask yourself also, how accessible is my load to others? In the lower picture there's a pickup truck with a spray tank there, and inserted picture there that says danger poison. This guy went to a training session and parked his vehicle and left that danger poison pesticide just sitting in the back of his vehicle. It just happened to be where the Department of Ag person who was delivering one of the talks had to walk by. He ended up getting $1,000 fine because of that. The gentleman from the Department of Ag had no choice but to write him up for it, because there it is sitting out where anybody can get to it. Some of the other vehicle precautions you ought to take, it's when you're loading your pesticides, you need to inspect the containers. Are your labels legible? Can you read those? Do you have tight seals on the caps of liquid pesticides? Are the containers clean so that you're not going to rub off glops of pesticide onto your truck bed or some other place? It's also recommended that you use the Rubbermaid type tubs or liners for extra containment and obviously for easier cleanup. It's a whole lot easier to clean a 12 by 18 Rubbermaid container than it is to clean your entire back of your truck. It also results in less handling of containers, which equals a reduced likelihood of damage to those pesticide containers. Finally, before you take off, you need to secure the load with either tarps, ropes, or tie downs. And if you've got equipment on the truck bed as well, that needs to be secured as well, so that it doesn't roll forward and puncture some of your pesticide containers. Now, here comes the part about the U.S. Department of Transportation and when you have to develop a transportation security plan. If the U.S. DOT requires you to put a placard on your vehicle because you're transporting a certain type or quantity of hazardous material, which pesticides are, you have to develop and have a transportation security plan in place. Placards are absolutely required if the pesticide has a DOT poison label. If it's in a container that contains more than 119 gallons, if you have quantities in there of more than 1,000 pounds of dry pesticide. Obviously, you're not going to hit these trigger points very often, but occasionally you might think you should carry a little bit more out and you might hit it. And if you get caught by a DOT inspector or a highway patrolman that's looking to inspect whether you've got all the things you need on your vehicle, you're going to find yourself with considerable fine. You also need to protect your pesticides from the elements during transport. A lot of the pesticides will start to degrade if they're kept below 40 degrees or if they're above 110 degrees. So you need to protect them a little bit from temperatures, especially in the winter time or in the middle of the summertime. You also need to remember that paper and cardboard containers don't like a lot of rainfall. And since thunderstorms develop so quickly around here, it's probably a good idea to have a waterproof cover on the back of your vehicle, or at least have them in something that you can put a waterproof cover over and keep the paper containers dry so that you don't end up losing a very valuable pesticide. You want to keep your pesticides separated when they're on your truck. Number one, keep them away from people and animals. You don't want anybody getting in there and getting poisoned accidentally. If your truck is carrying food, feed, seed, plant, veterinary supplies, they can get cross-contaminated by being placed next to the pesticides. A lot of people will pick up some food to take home to the wives or whoever's cooking dinner and leave it on the truck while they finish up a job site. And if they don't keep it separate from the pesticides, they can find out that's not a good idea. The other thing you need to worry about is keeping your herbicides separate from even the other pesticides that you have, such as insecticides, fungicides, and then fertilizer. If they get contaminated with a herbicide, you may end up with a very strange dying problem at the last place that you were working. And it can be very difficult to diagnose exactly what's causing that. Some of the herbicides it takes a very little amount of them to start killing some of the plants that you might be putting into the ground. Once you get to the job site, you have to worry about security there. You never want to leave your pesticides unattended, especially the ones in your service vehicle. The best thing to do is lock them away. If you have very dangerous pesticides, the danger poison, danger, even some of the warning, keep out of the reach of children type pesticides, you're going to need to have those locked whilst nobody's around the vehicle. You can use a foot locker or some similar lockable container like you see pictured in these two pictures. You don't want to allow access to kids to the pesticide. They're very curious and they will get into just about everything. You remember ever being a kid. Protect yourself from theft. Pesticides are extremely expensive, and you don't want your hundreds of dollars of pesticide to go walking someplace else. And as I said earlier, you don't want to co-locate those with food, drink, or other supplies because you might get cross contamination. Now, let's look at your pesticide storage facility. In the lower left-hand picture there, one that's just about perfect. They've got uh, that secondary containment that they use. You'll note that there may be 4 containers in the tub. All it has to do is hold the amount that's in one of those containers, because the likelihood of 2 of them leaking at the same exact time is pretty small. You also see on the floor in front some larger containers of pesticide. They have a larger tub that they're in that will contain the amount in one of the largest of the containers that's stored in there. The upper left-hand picture is one that's pretty well done. It's not perfect. It looks like they might be using wood for the base of the shelving. That's not a good idea because that would be impossible to clean if you were to have a leak. They're not using a secondary containment. They are storing the larger containers on the floor, the next largest size up above that, in the liquids, more liquids above that, and a mixture of the powders and dry products up at the top. They should be, you can see 1 or 2 of them are in plastic bags, but all of them should be stored in a plastic bag as a secondary containment. The center picture is someone trying to do it cheaply, and that would probably not pass an inspection by a Department of Ag person. Those, it looks like pie pans, will not hold even the small amount of pesticide that's in a couple of those conveyors, because there's just not enough room. So he would probably be advised to get some of the larger containers of the different type conveyors. The right-hand picture is a cabinet type pesticide storage facility that's just for people that have just small amounts of pesticide. And this guy's got his larger containers on the bottom. He's got a next level with some containers there inside of a secondary containment facility, small containers on the third shelf inside a secondary containment vessel. And then on the top, he's got his other materials, the dry products, also in secondary containment. So he's done a very good job for the small amount of pesticide that he has. Let's look at where you might locate your pesticide storage area. You want to avoid areas with wellheads and areas with streams or steep slopes down the streams. In Georgia, there's no required distance to have your pesticide storage facility away from a wellhead or away from surface waters. But both the Georgia Department of Ag and my office recommend that you be at least 100 feet away from a wellhead so that you don't have a possibility of a leak going down and reaching the wellhead body and going down beside the steel pipe there and getting into your groundwater. And 200 feet from surface waters give you a little bit more of a buffer there. You want to avoid areas where runoff to surface water or leaching the groundwater is very likely to occur. Sandy locations, you're going to get leaching to groundwater. Our clay areas around here, northeast and northwest part of the state, you can get a lot of movement over the surface of the ground from the clay being there. An ideal pesticide storage facility protects against certain things, such as exposure to people and animals. You notice this little girl sitting there, with pesticide on her pant leg and holding a container in her hands. If she ends up touching her mouth or getting her hands up near her mouth, she's likely to get a poisoning problem from that pesticide. Even a caution, keep out of the reach of children. The other things that a storage facility can do, it can protect against environmental contamination. That can be as big a headache or even more of a headache for you if you get an environmental group that's protesting against that. It also helps you control the extremes of temperature and moisture so that you have less likelihood of losing effectiveness of pesticides. It also protects you from theft, vandalism, and carelessness, which will help reduce your liability and losses from people stealing pesticides or doing vandalism against your pesticide storage facility. You want to control environmental conditions in your storage facility. You can see the fans here. They help keep the area cool, ventilated, and dry. They will reduce the temperature in the pesticide facility. They can remove dust and vapor out to the outside, where when you go in your facility, you won't have a problem breathing a lot of dust or gases. Sorry, I'm a little dry today. I had a 4-hour phone call last night. You also want to protect from excessive freezing or heat. Excessive heat can cause containers to break, melt, or explode. Some of your pesticides are highly volatile and can degrade. Here's another slide on the secondary containment strategy. You can just about count on leaks happening. So you want to use those hard rubber or plastic trays on your storage shelves. They should, at a minimum, contain the volume of the largest pesticide container in that tray. They can help reduce your spills, leaks, and cleanup time and cost from those. If you'll notice in the center lower picture, somebody's used a secondary containment strategy, but Lord knows if they'll ever be able to find a pesticide in there, whether they've got powders mixed with liquids or what, it's hard to tell. Such a jumble of product. As I said earlier, you don't really want to go with something like a pie pan that's not big enough to contain what's in the largest container in your secondary container. So there's a lot of thinking that's required to go along with this. Another thing you want to do is provide adequate lighting, because when you're in your pesticide storage area, you need to read the label before you take it out to the truck, so that you know it'll do what you're hoping to do that day with your pesticide application. It also helps you to spot leak, helps you when you're trying to clean up spills in the pesticide storage area, and it helps you when you've got to label replacement containers. One thing we don't often think of is using spark-proof fixtures and switches. But if you've got volatile pesticides in there, it's not a bad idea. You don't want it blowing up in your face. You want to use non-porous materials for the facility's floors and shelves. Carpet, wood, and soil are just very difficult to decontaminate. Go with sealed cement, glazed ceramic tile, or no-wax sheet flooring that's free of cracks. They will all be easy to clean. Floor should be sloped to a containment system. Typically, it's put in the center, can be on one of the corners. And you want to use plastic or metal for floor pallets to hold large containers. You've got to keep your pesticides safe and secure. They should be stored only in their original containers. Don't do like the man in the left-hand picture there, the pouring pesticide into a Coke bottle or something like that. You also do not want to lend or borrow pesticides in any kind of unmarked or unlabeled container. Somebody might pick it up, like the lady there, take a swig of it, and they will have a poisoning event they may die from. And you don't want that to occur. Also, when you're getting ready to opening a pesticide container and measuring out how much you need, as soon as you get that amount measured out, you want to immediately close that container so that you don't accidentally knock it over and create a spill that you then have to clean up. To store pesticides safely, you want to store on sturdy metal or plastic shelving. Put the heaviest containers and liquids on the low shelves. The large drums should be out on plastic or metal pallets. Seal your dry pesticides in plastic bags and store them above the liquid so the liquid doesn't drip down on the dry pesticide and destroy it, basically. In the lower picture, somebody's got a very well organized little storage cabinet. So they come in all different sizes, from the very large to the very small. Now, if you use volatile or in bulk pesticides, you've got to do them safely. You want to place bulk tanks on a concrete containment collection pad, such as this one. It needs to be diked to prevent spills or leaked pesticides from getting out of a confined area. The containment area inside the dike has to be at least the tank's volume. And depending on whether the tank, this storage area is covered with a roof or not covered, it has to have an additional volume. In Georgia, it's only 100% of the largest container if it's covered. If it's uncovered, exposed to rain, you've got to go to 110%. You want to keep your pesticides safe. Containment area drains should be connected to a holding tank. You want to fence off and lock the area to prevent tampering. Store any volatile pesticides separately to cut down on your potential fire hazard, explosive hazard, and contamination risk, especially of highly volatile ones. You want to manage your pesticide storage facility by storing only in the original containers. Do not store food, drinks, tobacco, feed, medication, vet supplies, feed, clothing, or PPE in your pesticide storage area. You need to have clean water available for decontamination. You also want to store pesticides by themselves and separate. None of that other stuff should be in the pesticide storage area. You also need to make sure your pesticide labels stay legible. If for some reason a label is destroyed or damaged, you want to mark that container, the trade name and the common name, the EPA registration number, percent active ingredient, percent of each active ingredient, the signal word, caution, warning, danger, poison, and the use classification, whether it's a restricted use or a general use pesticide. And then request a replacement label from the dealer or distributor that you originally bought it from to be able to put that back onto the container as soon as you can. Regularly check for damaged containers and spills. You want to make sure that you get any rust, leak, corrosion, breaks in your containers. If you find any, put on PPE and then clean up the spill or leak. And use that product immediately according to label directions. You want to transfer a leaking container to an appropriate container and label it. Your distributor can supply you with an appropriate container if you have one that's damaged beyond being able to be used. Manage the shelf life of your pesticides as well. They do grade over time, so you want to mark each container with its purchase date and the date you open it. Then find out Make yourself aware of its shelf life, whether it lasts 1 year, 2, 3, or 4, or even less, or even more. Watch the material for excessive clumping and poor suspension if it's a dry product. You get layers when you put it into your spray tank, or you get an abnormal color. All those are signs that it's decomposing, and it probably will not do the proper job of controlling the pests that you're trying to control. Just avoid storing large quantities of pesticides for long periods. You want to have an inventory and practice inventory control using your older product first and buying from year to year only what you need for that year. And another thing is don't generate hazardous waste. Leftover pesticides are hazardous waste. And it's extremely expensive to go to the trouble of disposing of them. You want hazardous waste also includes dirty, empty containers, outdated products, canceled products. You got to use those pesticides before their expiration date. You also want to use a dependable lock on your pesticide storage facility. Post highly visible signs there, like you see. You also want no smoking warnings because some of your pesticides may be volatile, flammable. So you don't want people eating, drinking, or smoking there. Some of the safety tips you need to remember for your storage facility is have duplicate copies of both the label and the product data sheets stored elsewhere. Wear the appropriate personal protective equipment in your facility so that you're not completely unprotected. Label all items used in handling pesticides and storing your facility. Be prepared to handle pesticide spills by having a spill kit. Here's some of the emergency equipment that you need to have available. You also need to read and store and follow the storage and disposal section of the label. Just remember, it's not optional. It is the law, and it's a federal law. The fines are substantial for not following that. One thing I'll mention about Georgia, a lot of times these storage and disposal sections will say something about if allowed in your state, you can bury or burn this container. In Georgia, you are not allowed to bury or to burn any pesticide container. They must be disposed of properly through a disposal company. You want to keep your pesticides secure while you're out on the job site. Unauthorized access poses several concerns. You can lose some of them. You might have theft. You might get an illegal use of it, and you can end up subject to lawsuits. Unsecured pesticides pose considerable dangers, especially during transport while you're applying it over lunch. You don't want to leave your thing unless it's locked up like this over lunchtime, or if you're at a hotel or something overnight, you need to make sure that things are locked up. Transporting or storing pesticides in an unsafe manner poses threats to human health, animals, the environment, the entire community. So you have to be aware of that and do your job. Let's look at an emergency or incident response. Planning is included in that. Planning for fires or spill cleanup. All of that is something that you have to watch out for. As you can see this in the upper left-hand corner, this aircraft was apparently spraying a field and had an emergency and had set down in the field. Definitely need a plan for what to do when that happens. On the right-hand side, there's a farm building in burning. If your pesticide storage facility is in there, you're going to want the firefighters to know what they're dealing with. They have black smoke. Let's see, some of the learning objectives we want to cover here are to learn about emergency response planning. We'll go over the steps for that. Know how to reduce some of your fire hazards, and then how to manage spills using the 3 C's. Controlling the spill is the first thing that you have to do. Then you have to contain the spill so it doesn't spread even further and wider. And finally, after you've contained it, you've got to clean it up. So those are the three C's that you'll use to take care of pesticide spills. Emergency response planning is just a form of contingency planning. What happens if a tornado comes through your business? Something like that. It protects you, your employees, the community around you. It minimizes how much environmental damage can get done uh, because you don't have a plan in place. It also reduces your liability, which can be substantial. There's some guidelines for developing that emergency response plan. The first one is to designate an emergency coordinator, somebody to make all the necessary calls to EMS, to the fire department, to the police, whoever you need to determine you need to call, and then to fill out all the reports that you're going to have to fill out to government agency. Having one person do that will make it so that you don't miss anything. You also need to post a list of names and phone numbers of those to be notified in the office, shop, and your vehicles. So that person knows who to contact to tell that there's been a problem. And then develop a fill-in form of critical information to provide for emergency personnel. That's relatively easy to do. You can do it with a grease pencil, where you can change it very easily if somebody leaves or a phone number changes or something else happens. You also want to prepare area and facility map, and before an incident occurs, give those to your local emergency office, fire, EMS, local police, maybe even the state police if you have an office nearby. Some of the next steps that you'll take are to keep an accurate inventory of the chemicals you have there. That inventory should reflect your peak seasonal inventories, pesticides, fertilizers, and fuel. Remember that fertilizers like ammonium nitrate and diesel fuel can result in very large explosions. So the fire department needs to know what they're dealing with when they come to deal with a fire. You want to display copies of your safety data sheets away from the storage area. You want to maintain your emergency equipment and supplies in good condition. The gloves, even heavy duty gloves, will eventually deteriorate after time if they're exposed to sunlight or if they're exposed to a lot of heat and humidity. So you need to check that equipment every once in a while. Finally, you need to train your employees regularly on how to execute that response plan. Go through a practice step by step through your procedures. Make sure everyone knows what they're supposed to do and how to do it and what things to look out for if something goes wrong. For pesticide spills, there are a number of safety tips here for you. You can see in the upper picture there, it's a spill kit. It's a little hard to tell, but there are safety goggles there for protecting your eyesight. There's tape for taping off a spill area. It looks like a PAM or atropine injection system there in case somebody gets a severe poisoning event. There are also the snakes for containing the spill, container to put the cleanup material into so that you can dispose of it properly. In the lower picture, you can see someone putting out kitty litter or clay material to soak up that pesticide spill. What you want to have is a good spill plan with absorbent materials ready for the spills or leaks you might have to deal with. Clay particles, kitty litter, vermiculite are all good ones for that. Sawdust can be used, but you have to be careful. because if you have a highly oxidative chemical, you can light the sawdust on fire, which is something you want to avoid. Consider using the commercially available spill kits. They're not that terribly expensive. If you were to try to build one yourself, you might end up spending actually more than the ones that are available commercially. So consider that possibility. You need to have a shovel, broom, dustpan, heavy duty plastic bags or a plastic drum available. So when you sweep this stuff up and get it up, you have some place to put it that you can then take it out and apply it to a site or send it off to be disposed of as hazardous waste. You need a spill kit nearby. You can see several different possible types of spill kits here. Whenever you mix and measure your pesticides, when you are actually out there applying the pesticides or handling them, you need a spill kit available. And that includes in your storage area, at your application site, uh, any kind of cleanup site that you're doing, and in your transport vehicle. So whenever your trucks go out, they should have a spill kit in the back compartment with them so that if anything happens, they're set and ready to go. Spill kits should include the emergency phone numbers, the personal protective equipment. You can see the heavy duty gloves and the eye protection there, absorbent materials, the pillows, the pads, the clay, pet litter, activated charcoal, vermiculite, then a shovel and a broom, dustpan, large sturdy plastic bags or drums to put it in. All that are part of your spill kit. However, you want to try to prevent them rather than reacting to them. One way to do that is closely inspect and maintain your vehicles and equipment. Check them at the beginning of the work week every week. Make sure the oil's up to where it should be. Belts are secure and tight. Just check your vehicles very carefully. Then understand your spray equipment and how to operate it and how to repair it. Just overall, you just want to be a safe driver when you're taking this material out to your job site. Okay, dealing with pesticide spills. First thing you need to do is protect yourself and others by putting on the personal protective equipment that you need for that particular product. Then if somebody is in serious medical condition, administer first aid if needed. Just remember that every different spill has different hazards associated with it because it's a different pesticide, a different amount of that pesticide or other pesticides. There may even be mixtures there. You need to respond to the spill, which can go from a very small spill to a very large one. You can see in the upper left-hand picture there, I think that's a tree green truck spilled over, and whatever it was supplying to the lawns is all over the highway there. They've already tried to contain it a good deal, but that's going to be a pretty big spill. The smaller one to the left-hand upper side is just a spill in the storage area. That one would be relatively easy to clean up. The next thing this guy has to do is put on his personal protective equipment, and stand that container upright so that he doesn't get more spilling out onto the floor. The guys in the lower picture are cleaning up from a highway spill, putting it in those containers, hopefully to take out to a site and just apply it to the site so they don't have to dispose of it as hazardous waste. So the first section we'll go through is control. You want to control that spill, have on the PPE, then stop the leak or spill. Stand that container upright, put something in there to prevent the leak, put the small container into a larger container, plug a leak with stick or anything you can imagine to come up with to stop that from continuing to leak. You also want to have a cell phone handy. If you're out on a highway and have a spill, you want to alert the police so they can help direct traffic around you and slow that traffic down. You may need to alert other state agencies if pesticides are involved, the State Department of Agriculture, if it's, say, a wetland area or a waterfowl area or some other wildlife area. You may need to get the Department of Natural Resources involved. You want to have the label with you, safety data sheets for the first responders that show up. They need to know what they're going to deal with and what personal protective equipment they're going to need. If you get a large spill like you see here, these trucks turned over from accident, you need to send someone to get help. Don't leave the site unattended. If it goes into a stream like the center picture there, uh, whoever's down stream of that, if there's any type of water treatment plant, they're going to need to be notified very quickly so they can shut down their intake. For the major spills, you should call your state or local emergency management office. Some local areas have an emergency management office, but the state has one as well. The other number you can use is Chemtrek. They're 24/7, 365. They will give you advice on what to do next. If a manufacturer has an emergency number listed on their label, it's worthwhile doing that as well. They may know something that nobody else knows about that. You need to rope off the area and keep people out. You want a 30-foot diameter with people upwind so that they don't breathe in fumes. If you've got spilled material that's flammable, don't use flares. And you want to evacuate people from downwind areas if it's a highly volatile pesticide. Just be sure to write everything down at the time that it's happening. It's for your own legal protection. You want to keep activities of every record of activity of everything that goes on, all the conversations you have with regulatory authorities, emergency personnel, even the public. Good documentation with time notes or time stamps is critical. You can do the time stamps by using your cell phone. They tag pictures with date and time, so they're very useful in court and can save you a lot of money that way. Next thing you do after you control the spill is to contain it. You want to do everything possible to prevent its spread. You can build a dike or a dam around it. A shovel and dirt can build a dam around it very quickly. Or these snakes, you can just lay out around it to keep it contained. Whatever happens, you don't want it to get into a water body if you can avoid it. So those snakes are really good for that. It includes both sewers and storm drains. The water body is contaminated. You need to contact the appropriate state agencies. You will need to notify the emergency planning coordinator in your area or the state. You got to do it quickly because if it gets downstream and contaminates drinking water, that's going to be very costly for you. Then by containing the spills, you'll go to the trouble of putting out the absorbent materials over the entire spill. I told you about the sawdust before. Pillows, tubes, or pads are easy, but you've got to dispose of them properly. You may be able to mix or to apply a labeled site at the maximum wear rate so you don't generate waste. That's always something to keep in mind. It contains dust, wettable powders, or granular spills. You might want to lightly mist water to keep it from being blown off site by vehicles going past at high speed. You can do like these guys in the lower picture, is cover it with plastic to try to keep that wind from getting up under it and blowing it out into the environment there. Finally, you need to clean up the spill after you add that absorbent material, sweep it up, scrub it up, put it into the lined drum or bag, then go back with 30% bleach. or hydrated lime to neutralize the area. Never use bleach and lime together because it will generate chlorine gas. Believe me, that's the last thing you want to get in your lungs. I have been exposed to chlorine gas at swimming pools before, and it is not easy to get over. Use a coarse broom with very stiff bristles, work the drying material into the area, and then work the bleach or the hydrated lime into the area and sweep that up and get it into your container. Wear protective equipment. Don't use lime and bleach together, and repeat as necessary until you have it well cleaned up. If you get soil that's contaminated, do like these guys are doing, remove the top 2 to 3 inches of soil, dispose of it as hazardous waste. If you can't put it onto a labeled site, then cover with 2 inches of lime and then fresh topsoil. Or you can add activated charcoal for minor spills. That will help a little bit. Finally, you need to clean all of your contaminated equipment. Wear protective equipment when you're doing that. Use bleach or an alkaline detergent, but not both of them together because bleach, hand soaps, or detergents can release chlorine gas. And the post-spill cleanup means both you and the material that you use that needs to be discarded, such as brain, shoes, cloth hat. Any disposables or highly contaminated clothing needs to be disposed of as hazardous waste. Wash yourself thoroughly with soap and water and get into clean clothes as soon as you can. Okay, now for fire hazards, put pesticide storage facility away from people and animals. Keep it locked. Clearly post warning signs. Notify the fire department of the location and contents. That's why you need that list of what you have in stock at all times. Develop an emergency plan and train workers to execute it. Keep that inventory accurate. You need product names, volumes, and locations, copies of the labels, the safety data sheets of the old material safety data sheet, business maps, and your personal protective equipment. All of that should be kept away from the storage area. You'll need some emergency equipment, tools to dive, trench, or pump or vacuum, containment and cleanup materials such as spill kits, fire extinguishers, personal protective equipment. And looks like we're at the end here, and I hope I'm not too far over, Richie.
Thank you so much, Vicky, for the excellent presentation.
Come on, okay.
So we have maybe time for one question. So if you have any questions, we have that Q&A that you need to just type it in there and I can read it for Vicky.
That's a lot to cover in a short period of time, but
a lot of material, but it's very valuable information.
yeah.
I'll give 1 minute and see if anybody has any questions. If not, we will conclude your talk. Okay. Vicky, meanwhile, have you been to any spill situation like this before, where in person?
Actually, not in person. No, fortunately, they don't happen very often, and usually it's a small spill. But some of those truck spills were over towards Atlanta. And I guess if I had television, I would have known about it and could have gone over and seen it, but they probably didn't want any more people there than that.
No.
I imagine that one that went into a stream was a really difficult one because that looked like at least a 500-gallon and not a 1,000-gallon tank. That's a lot of pesticide to go into a stream bed. It wasn't that big a stream.
It's very difficult to manage that. We just get to the bigger streams, right?
Say again?
The management will be tougher if it goes to a bigger streams like that.
Yes, cleaning that up was probably $1 million or more, I would guess. It was not cheap because he's got to clean until he's the whole stream there until it gets to where it's stopped flowing with pesticide in it.
Looks like we don't have any more questions. And that means thank you so much, Dr. Taylor, for the wonderful presentation.